can all hear me okay, yeah? Excellent. Well, thank you for inviting me to speak to this meeting. Let me just set the scene for you. Back in 2014, the Nuffield Trust told the NHS they needed to build 22 800-bedded hospitals before 2022, just to meet current demands. Have they started building new hospitals? No. However, Bruce Keogh, who's just resigned sadly, said technology will save the NHS. So what's going on? Why is it so difficult to adopt, for the NHS to adopt medical technologies? Unfortunately, does the NHS recognise the benefits that medical devices and diagnostics bring to the health service? Do they recognise it? At the moment, you get media, things like hip replacement, metal-on-metal, vaginal mesh repairs, and the breast implant scandal is not good. On top of that, over the next few years, you're going to see downward pressure on pricing for medical devices because procurement is being centralised. So for those companies out there that sell devices to different hospitals for different prices, it's going to be found out. People are going to know centrally how much they're paying for products, and on top of the dollar and pound exchange rate, it's a challenging future. My presentation really is about how we as medical device companies can start working to demonstrate value to the system and hopefully get recognised in the way that the pharmaceutical industries get recognised in the way that they provide drugs to the NHS. And even those that cost more than NICE have set boundaries for. So we're talking about a journey of market access for medical devices in the NHS. And we all start off with very bright ideas. And this is what normally happens. You know, designers make products, they look at the size of the market, they think, yeah, it looks big enough, lots of hospitals. They think of sales pricing, yeah, well, we can make lots of money. They start early engagement with key opinion leaders and trying to sell it. And at the same time they're selling the company's story, they're setting their companies up, they're finding investment and trying to keep the investors happy. A lot of you will be aware of this, but along the journey, before you actually start selling products, you need to show the value you'll bring in the technology to the investors. You need to hit the milestones and keep the investors happy as well. And it's tough. Manufacturing products, prototypes, CE marking, you go through all of this. You go through testing the product. Lots of talks about testing and lots of companies that can help. You know, are people thinking about gaining the right levels of evidence, though, for reimbursement? We'll come back to that. And then you're ready to launch. You've done all that work, CE marked. Question, can the NHS buy the product? Is there a code available to cover the reimbursement for your products? You've done all of that work. Can they pay for it? Good question. And it's something that I get phone calls about 3 times a week from across the world of companies that want to launch products into the NHS. Can the NHS buy it? Is it reimbursable? Reimbursement is very complex. It's very difficult. And my journey started when I commercialised a product called Venous Closure in 2005, which was a brand new way of treating varicose veins. Varicose veins been treated about the same way since the Roman times when they'd strip veins out. You'd heard about vein stripping. Veins would be stripped out. I introduced a technology which you go into operating theatres, involved a £300 electronic catheter and an electronic box of tricks at £10,000, and I had to convince theatre managers and theatre sisters to stop buying a £15 vein stripper and invest in this technology. And it was very difficult. How do you start? Well, we pay 15 quid, that's 300, too expensive. How do you start building a value proposition around something like that? Was I talking to the right people? Over the years, commercialising venous closure, which is now the standard of care for varicose vein treatments in England, certainly, I started learning about how things got paid for. What is the mechanism for reimbursement? What happens when a patient comes into hospital that means that an invoice is paid by the commissioner or the CCG to the hospital for that activity? And that activity is all recorded in NHS database, and I'll talk about that in a minute as well. But when it comes to launching, are you launching effectively? How big is the opportunity? There's no point in thinking, well, Johns Hopkins University Hospital in Los Angeles does 50,000 of these. Makes no difference. Talking about the NHS. How big is the opportunity? How well will your technology solve a problem? When you get in front of the decision makers, how well do you know what their clinical and productivity issues are? How well do you know how the hospital is working? How can you measure outcomes and clinical success? How are you going to build a long-term value proposition with the NHS, with the hospitals and nationally? And because everybody's trying to differentiate, otherwise you're just a supplier of a product. How do you build that credible story? How do you get into a carpeted area of a hospital as opposed to a clinical area? How do you move up into where decisions are made, financial decisions are made, and clinical decisions are made on new technologies? Very difficult unless you understand what's going on in that hospital. How are you going to be trusted and a partner? And this is a journey. What we're trying to do is get from manufacturing to mass adoption. And how do we do it? It's difficult. And I talk to companies every week. I've worked with 180 companies in the last 7 years since I ran this company, and I've dealt with every part of the body in most medical technologies. So I'm just giving you some guidance on a journey that I hear and I see. So what we're trying to do is preparing you for a journey. And the journey I found over the last 7 years of working in market access and reimbursement is like a game of Connect 4. Connect 4, I'm sure all of you have played it at Christmas time. It's a great game. You need four in a row to win. And those four things are primarily patient benefit. What is it you've got that will improve patient outcomes? It's got to benefit the patient. It's got to benefit the hospital, and this is where it gets really interesting, because benefiting the hospital now is about relieving pressure. It's about improving productivity, reducing waiting lists. It's about improving outcomes, and if you really want to get them interested, it's about generating profit. Something that people don't think about when they're engaging with hospitals. They're going and saying, we can save you money. The NHS hospitals want to generate profit, because as you saw earlier, some of the procedures they perform may not make any money at all. They lose money on procedures. It's understanding the money side gets you into understanding profit and how profitable a procedure could be. Payer benefit. What's the benefit for the commissioner to pay the hospital for the activity on the patient? And that normally involves implementing government policy, driving down waiting lists, reducing pressure ulcers, reducing falls and trips, and are they meeting the government targets? And the last person that's got to win is you, the company. You're going to invest millions of pounds in commercialising a medical device into NHS England. You've got to benefit from it as well. So how are you going to benefit? When are you going to start seeing the benefit of that journey? So go back to the journey, and it's all about engaging with early adopters. When you've got something new, you go to find the early adopters. You don't want to go to the wrong place. And this happens a lot. People think that all the activity happens in London. They think that, lots of Americans I speak to think it all happens in Harley Street. It's incredible. But if you know where the activity is, it helps you to understand how to go in and offer a solution to the NHS. So it's really important when you are actually going to market is understanding where you can go and what problem you're going to solve with your technology. And for that, we can help by starting to look at how current treatments are paid for within the system. So we research current patient treatment pathways. We do that because we have access to NHS digital information. We have access to data. I'll go into that in a minute. But through that, we can help to start looking at how you and your medical device can actually be a solution to a problem in the system. So it's all about data. Every time you go into hospital, you get admitted, whether you go through A&E, an ambulance, walking from a GP, then information is recorded, and that data we have access to. It's pseudonymized, and we have access to 750 million episodes of care going back 4 years. What does it mean? What does that information contain? That information contains how a patient got in and patient demographics, age, sex. We don't know their name, we know their age, we know their sex, We know where they were referred from, and then we know initially when they go into hospital what they were diagnosed with. You might go in primarily diagnosed with a gallbladder issue, but you may also have diabetes, be in a wheelchair, be incontinent and blind. All of that information is recorded. We use that information to analyse, but once you've been admitted and you've been diagnosed with whatever's wrong with you, then you normally have a number of things like extra diagnostic analysis, or you may have a number of procedures, and we know whether it's left or right-sided, laparoscopic open. We know all about the types of procedures that are performed, and we know whether there were complications. We know how long the patient was in hospital for. We can look at length of stay analysis, and we can compare analysis between hospitals. So this is how it works, really. Once a patient leaves the hospital, all of that information, the diagnostic procedure, discharge information, is produces an invoice, and that invoice is best described as an HRG or a DRG. That's the terminology for how the monetary events, how those events get totaled up into an invoice to the commissioner. And that's how it works. So within the NHS system, diagnostic codes, there's tens of thousands of diagnostic codes, there's procedure codes, and they all create a payment code, and the commissioner pays. Now, unfortunately, back in September 2015, Monitor, who actually run the NHS price list for procedures, turned around and said, we are not creating any new procedure codes until 2020. Okay, that means if you have a new technology and you want to sell it into the NHS and there's not a code that describes that procedure, come back in 2020. That's like the pharmaceutical industry being told, well, I'm sorry, but you can't have a new prescription code until 2020. The pharmaceutical industry will be up in arms, but literally this is all complicated stuff. So actually understanding the flexibility and the possibilities for coding, there are some very variable codes that can be used to describe new procedures. We can often get round it, but sometimes it's difficult. But it is challenging that there are no new codes until 2020. So what do we do with this data? Well, we help with companies to help them through this journey, and that often involves taking them through NICE, but I'll go into that in a moment. But the important thing in those early accounts is to build the evidence and demonstrate the value of the technology, what that technology benefit will bring to the hospital and to the NHS. Early adopters are very important. But to get over to the other side is challenging. And, you know, a lot of companies, even big companies, are at this point here. They don't ever get mass adoption. They get 10 hospitals using something. What is out there to help you get mass adoption on a new procedure, a new treatment? Well, back in 2011, NICE introduced new programs to help evaluate new technologies. You heard from Tom Clutton-Brock earlier. He works in the interventional procedure side of NICE, but there are other programs in NICE. And in the last 12 months, we've actually helped 4 companies get NICE approval. But I'll go into a bit more detail. But that often is the way of driving adoption, is to look at that. And to get to that stage, over your period of time of launch to building up evidence and value to go for larger adoption, those 3 bridges are trying to get patient support, patient groups, patient charities, get patients involved that may have benefited from the technology, or their carers. The next part of the bridge is getting and continuing to get clinical support, clinician support from doctors who use the technology to help to speak highly of it, to recommend and talk about the benefits it's brought to the system. The last bit is the evidence, is building the evidence that you do when you launch a product, making sure that that meets the criteria that NICE may want. So driving wider adoption, I've worked remarkably close with NICE, the NIHR and NOCRI, of which NOCRI are here on stand 24, but I'll talk about NOCRI in a second. What do these guys do? Well, it's complicated. I mean, if we look at NICE, I I'm only going to show you 2 departments of NICE in this slide because it could go on forever, but there are 5 different programs in NICE that a medical technology can go through. There's 5. There's interventional procedures that looks at safety and efficacy of new interventional procedures. There's MedTech guidance, which is, I'm talking about in a minute, which talks about safety, efficacy and cost effectiveness. There's diagnostic assessment program, which looks at diagnostics that are more expensive and more effective. There's clinical guidelines that tell the NHS how they treat a patient from being diagnosed. What do you do if you have, I don't know, kidney stones? What's the first thing that you should do? How should you be assessed? Where should you go? What treatment should you have? That's clinical guidelines. And the last one is technology appraisal, which is a difficult word to use because everybody thinks that NICE does technology appraisals, but technology appraisal is a part of NICE. Since 2000, since about the year 2000, NICE have done 350 or so technology appraisals on drugs and devices. Only 35 of them have been done on medical devices. The rest have been on drugs. What does it mean? Technology appraisal leads to mandatory funding, leads to the NHS being told they need to adopt or they should have products or procedures or drugs in place within 90 days of NICE saying they've got to be adopted. So it's all in the balance, really, of the pharmaceutical industry at the moment. They can get technology adoption, technology approval, and that leads to mandated funding. It's more difficult getting medical devices paid for because there is no real mandated funding for them, and there hasn't been since 2009, which was the last time that NICE did a technology appraisal on a medical device. So technology appraisal program is not one. If you think you can come to this market, get NICE approval, it means that it will be paid for and mandated. It doesn't really happen, sorry, but that's the pharmaceutical industry has the benefit of that particular program. But what we do have is some very good programs, which are MedTech guidance programs. So we know what NICE does. I describe it to many of my American clients. It's like the J.D. Power or the Which magazine. They tell the NHS, is it good? Does it work? How does it compare to other things? Is it good value? Is it reliable? Is it safe? But NICE have been very, very good at helping to push the uptake of medical devices since they started the MedTech guidance program in about 2011. And they want to increase the uptake of beneficial new technologies. They support payers and care providers. They assist clinicians and inform patients. That's what NICE does. What they look at within the program that Tom Clutton-Brock was presenting on earlier, which was the interventional procedures, they look at the safety and efficacy of new procedures. When I say new procedures, that normally means something that goes in or through the body, which is invasive. They will evaluate the safety and efficacy of new procedures and tell the NHS, is it safe, does it work, safe enough for it to be used in the NHS. The one that I've been doing a lot of work with as well is the Medical Technology Guidance Program, which looks at safety, efficacy and cost utility. And it's about understanding whether a product is cost effective compared to the comparator. So that's NICE, and I can talk a lot about NICE, but we've done a lot of work with NICE. We've taken lots of technologies through NICE over the years, and that for a lot of companies is a big win because NICE is recognised as the world's biggest and most trusted HTA, and to get NICE approval can help companies globally as well as helping to have the credibility of engaging and commercialising into the NHS. There's another organisation here that many companies don't know about. It's a big organisation called the National Institute of Health Research. And in summary, they actually help to do research on new technologies and help to do research to bring new technologies to market earlier. And they're a fantastic organisation. They're a big organisation. They spend about $18 million a day on research. But the way into this organisation really is through an organisation called NOCRI. And NOCRI have got a booth here on booth number 24. And what they do, they're really the front door. If you're a medical technology company and you want to take your product into the NHS and do some early stage research, then NOCRI is a great organisation to know and to go and meet with, and they can give you guidance and help in terms of where you need to go, what evidence you may need for NICE, etc. So they're the point of entry for the medtech industry. They signpost companies in the right departments. They actually make introductions to clinicians and specialist centres. We have in the UK about 8 what are known as health technology cooperatives. Tom Clutton-Brock, who you met earlier, works for the one that looks at trauma, but you have Cambridge that looks at brain. You have Devices for Dignity in Sheffield, which looks at incontinence and other things. You have Oxford that looks at diagnostic. There's regional places in the NHS infrastructure to help companies take products to them and do research and credible research, which all helps to build the credible story, value proposition for NICE and for the NHS. But ultimately, they're about accelerating time it takes for research ethic approvals, and also there's also very good opportunities for funding as well, funded research, but NOCRI are a remarkable organisation. So these are some of the people that I've worked very closely with that have helped many of my clients get their medical technologies to market. So we're really talking about the journey, and people approach it in different ways, but ultimately, it's understanding if you've got a new piece of kit, can it be paid for? Are you better off going to another country? Each country has different drivers and incentives. Let's take Germany. Been working with a new technology for benign prostate hyperplasia, which enables a man to have his prostate blasted with steam in 15 minutes and then leave the hospital an hour later. Great, fantastic for the NHS because they can do 9 or 10 procedures in the morning as opposed to 2. The length of stay is a third of a day as opposed to 2.4 days, which is the average length of stay for a prostate procedure. Sounds fantastic. Take it to Germany though. Germany aren't interested in day case procedures. Germany are more interested in patients staying in hospital for longer because that's how they generate income. So it's understanding the drivers in each market. And I think the important thing that I want to put together today is it's going to get tough. The NHS are going to be looking at, they talk about looking at new technologies. Can it be paid for? Is it reimbursable? Is there a code that covers that activity in the system? If you don't know that, then you could be heading for the little island with no hope of success at all. But understanding all of that about activity and the benefits that technology you bring is the sort of work we get involved in and have done for several years. So that's sort of what we do. We help you. We think we help increase speed to market and increasing value. But the important thing is, as I say, you go through this journey, funding's all over the place, and you can go to the wrong place, but it's really about understanding the benefits, the solution that you will bring to the system is what we are able to help companies with. So I don't know if there's any questions at all, but thank you for your attention.